Thank you for clicking play. I'm going to take a few minutes of your time. We are going to talk about objectivity in leadership. Is it important? Is it critical? Does it help? Should we throw it out the window? Should it be okay to run on a single issue, to show up with a heavy bias? I don't think it is. I think you are inherently unempathetic, unsympathetic when you are saying, the people on this side of my bias are opposed to my bias. I do not represent. I do not take their input. I am not going to hear them. Psychology today says that in order to be a more effective leader, you have to have greater objectivity. Greater than what? Greater than less effective leaders, presumably. The reason this is significant is my opponents one of my opponents has come out saying, I am running as an anti-smelter candidate. I don't even know what that means. It sounds absurd. What it means to me is I am running as an anti-smelter candidate, which is to say, if you have an opposing viewpoint, I do not represent you, as opposed to representing everyone equally. That's, of course, what objectivity is. So let's get started. Hypothetically speaking, let's say a commissioner candidate was an environmental activist. Okay, nothing wrong with that, right? We all live here, we all drink the water, we all breathe the air, we want it to be clean, it's a beautiful area, we got to take care of it. First of all, let's cross this bridge now. Can our ecology and our economy work together? Okay, Department of Ecology seems to think so. Their goal is clean air and clean water with a strong economy. I happen to be all for that. That sounds amazing. Has to be a balance though, doesn't there? But if you were an environmental activist, you would probably, well, you would almost inherently have to be against things like industrial emissions, right? How much? That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. How much emissions? What's the level? Good luck getting the answer to that question. The number is not zero, I can tell you that, because a lot of people who are against industrial emissions, they'll drive one-ton dualies around town, big old diesels with black smoke pouring out of them. They're going to have a wood stove. They might have two, and if you look deep enough, I bet you could find one with two wood stoves and one in the shop for a total of 3. So emissions, in as much as it helps you specifically, well, I guess those are okay. But if you wanted a number, okay, I agree, no emissions, what is the number that is acceptable? Good luck getting that number. I've asked for 3 years, I've never got any kind of answer, let alone a satisfactory one. It's because they're against the idea as much as anything. Just no polluting of any kind. It's not a tenable position, I'm afraid. It's not even a position they take personally in their own lives. It's not a position they're leading by example. So just industrial emissions, right? Industry is bad. Those are bad guys. And so we're just going to come out against that as a whole. Okay? If you were against industrial emissions because you were an environmental activist, you would certainly come out against a company like PacWest, right? And the $300 million investment that they wanted to pour into this town. They wanted to invest in our people, in our town, our infrastructure, bring jobs, the whole works. The roads, the sales tax, the property tax, and of course the direct payroll. So you would have to be against them, but that's not enough. You can't just be against the current or recent industry. You would have certainly been against a company like PNC, right? They've got industrial emissions. You might have been against a company like TechMine because that's what they represent, and who knows what other ones back here in the past, right? Some of these industries that built Pend Oreille County, you would have definitely had to be against those if you were against a company like PacWest. But here's where it's significant, and pay attention here, because this is what we're talking about right now. We've got a hole to dig out of, right? So what about these companies in the future? What about the industry that wants to come here, that wants to invest here? We got to be against those too, right? Any industrial emissions, that's a zero emission standard. Never mind, we wouldn't have a county with a standard like that, or a country with a standard like that, right? So you guys, I don't even care to think about the tens, the hundreds of millions of dollars that this represents. Just the same, there it is. So you've come out, we'll just stick with this one, right? We're not going to speculate on those or those. This one is the iron in the fire right now. If you were against a company like PacWest, you would probably have to be against changes to zoning, right? I mean, we can see this pretty clearly. We've got a fairly archaic way of zoning. I think we're one of two left in the state, maybe 2 counties left in the state who still use the public lands designation, which is a nightmare. You get caught up in zoning purgatory. Hard to get it changed to a zone that you want. So you're going to stand in the way of zoning changes, because by standing in the way of those, you're standing in the way and getting what you want ultimately right up the tree here. Of course, you're going to talk a lot about urban sprawl. This concept, listen, we're going to talk about this more later, urban sprawl. Suffice to say, the red marker doesn't work. Suffice to say, urban sprawl is an urban concept for urban areas. When I get to the definition, you're going to find this, we're spending an awful lot of time on something that's absolutely irrelevant here. But you're going to use urban sprawl against your own county. Here's another thing you might do. You might be against the legal land sale, right? Legal land sale to the tune of $170,000 and counting in legal fees. And that's significant because essentially you have a commissioner candidate suing the county, suing the PUD, our own citizens suing us, losing again and again and again, but burning our money just the same. And I would challenge you to find out from them, where does that come from in the budget? Who are they? Which one of their friends are they going to tell, sorry, your program is cut because we're missing all of this money? I'd like to see where that's coming from, and I would challenge you to provide them with that answer. Which programs are getting cut? Because we're $170K short this time. So the lawsuit, someone running for office while actively or just recently suing the lawsuit, I don't much care for that. Maybe I can understand it in certain circumstances, but why did they sue? Because we wanted to grow. Essentially, in a nutshell, that's the whole thing. Whether they felt like we did it right or wrong, it wasn't a conversation. They're suing us because we're trying to grow. We're trying to get paychecks to people, and it resulted in a lawsuit. You would also have to be, you might use the Growth Management Act against us. Talk about some of these obscure things that are really urban concepts, really for other areas. We do have a Growth Management Act. It's supposed to help us grow in a direction. It's not supposed to be used as a club to confine us, to keep the not in my backyard people pacified, right? That's just not a realistic use of it. And then finally, and this is the one on the docket right now, you would certainly have to be against the business park. And the reason this is significant is because this is the future that all of the leadership is looking towards, okay? These are the exports that we have been missing. I've said it a dozen times, I'll say it a dozen more. The biggest problem I've seen maybe in past leadership, and I'm talking about 30 years at this point, 3 decades, is we have not done a good enough job of replacing our exporters as they've gone out of business, okay? So essentially we get to a place where the mills are closing down, Tech Mine closed down, PNC, who knows how long they'll last, and so we just have our own money to pass back and forth, minus the governor's cut. And that's not cutting it anymore, right? That's just not enough. We have to bring money in from outside. However we do that, exporters are a quick turnkey way to do that for sure. I don't know why. It's 30 years in the making. We've been losing exporters but not bringing them in. So this is the direction that gets us there, right? If the first rule of holes is to stop digging, you got to put down the shovel. This is saying we're going to put down the shovel and we're going to climb out of this hole, okay? So the business park itself, this is critical because a lot of people, including my opponent, have a very dim understanding of what the business park is. It's not a replacement for downtown. It's not even the same kinds of businesses. These are exporters. This isn't a brick and mortar storefront that needs to be shiny and pretty. This is a place for light industrial, for manufacturing, for tech space, things of that nature where you don't need traffic driving by to generate revenue. Their revenue is out of the county. It might be national, it might be international. These are not the same kind of businesses that are downtown. Why is that significant? A lot of folks, including my opponent, are saying, no, we need to be spending our money on downtown infrastructure. I agree. That is absolutely critical that we find money to spend on downtown infrastructure. Here's the point. Where's the money coming from? You haven't answered that question. That's if you let that genie out of the bottle, right? This is where the money's coming from the exporters. You got to have the money first, then you revitalize downtown. That is the order of business. Listen, one point I'd like to make that I've made a few times, I'll make it here now. We have the traffic, believe it or not. We're talking about, well, let's bend some of our money towards tourism. I'm not against the idea. It would be a great supplemental income. Our Safeway seems to indicate, with national sales records, that we have the traffic already. We've got the traffic. They're not stopping, they're not spending money, and we don't have enough money here to spend on our own. So I don't think we have to do a lot to get more traffic. I think the traffic is here. I think we have to find ways to get them to stop, and we have to find other creative ways, bold solutions like a business park, to get people here. Who's going to be in the business park? We don't know yet. It's not built yet. But if you talk to Russ, the city administrator, he's going to tell you there's some irons in the fire, okay? I asked him specifically, I said, Russ, it's one thing to build it and say, Field of Dream style, if you build it, they will come. Is that realistic, Russ? Are they really going to come if we build this business park? He said, he didn't hesitate for 1 second. He said, I've done a number of these. They always fill up. They all have filled up. Okay, didn't have it, and when people heard he was working on it, he's got calls already. He's got people interested. We don't have any downstream contracts in place yet. He says, not a problem. Okay, that was a load off for me. Should be a load off for you. This is very exciting. But as an environmental activist against industrial emissions, against Pac West, against all that represents, because you don't want to see a Pac West, you have to sue the county. You have to talk about urban sprawl. You have to be against zoning changes. You have to use our GMA against us, and you have to be against the business park because you are just not going to let this thing happen, regardless of what has to stall and what has to die in the meantime. So you can see all of this is loosely related, if related at all, realistically, to Pac West. But if you can't let this go, because you can't let this go, you are hurting the town. It's just that simple. I hope you're not going to stand for it. I told you I'd get back to urban sprawl. This is the definition of urban sprawl: unplanned growth. It's really just that simple. Is it just happening on accident? Well, guess what, folks? We got a river on one side of town. We got the entire state of Idaho on another side of town. There's only 2 directions we can grow, and it's all planned. In point of fact, I think we have maybe 14 empty storefronts downtown at this point, so it's not even sprawl, it's urban shrink. Is that a thing? It's rural shrink. So, this is how tone deaf my opponent is. We're going to talk about urban sprawl when what we're really worried about is rural shrink, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at right now. I don't know how you can be so far off and think you're going to represent the people of this county. I don't know how you can single out a business to discriminate against. The entire idea is absurd. If you just replace this business name with any other business name in town, I think you'll hear how ridiculous it sounds. I'm not even sure about the legality of it. I think we've got a place in process nationally, a process in place nationally, at the state level, certainly at the county level, things we want to see. If you can jump through those hoops, you get to be in business. Congratulations, you don't get discriminated against. I hope this makes sense. Please leave some questions, leave some comments. I'd like to answer even the tough ones, even if I have to research, maybe especially if I have to research, because I enjoy it, because I learn a little something every time. So this is what I've got for you now. Please share this with your friends if this makes sense to you. This right here, this is the future. This is the direction. If you got to have a captain of the ship pointing this ship back in the right direction, you want to know that your county commissioners, that the city, that the planning commission, that everyone's pointed in the right direction, in the same direction for starters. So this is going to be a critical part of our solution. Outside money coming to us for a change. If you disagree, leave it in the comments. I'd like to know why. Maybe we can discuss it. Thank you guys, and I will see you next time.